Monday, July 22nd, 1895. Sam Clemens and party departed Duluth, Minnesota, immediately after his show there. They boarded the St. Paul and Duluth Railway, also known as the Scaly Line, 11:20 p.m. and arrived in Minneapolis, Minnesota, the next morning after a 160-mile ride. The land of Hiawatha, Lake Minnetonka, and the Minnehaha Falls. The Grand Excursion, a trip sponsored by the Rock Island Railroad, brought more than 1,000 curious travelers into the area by rail and steamboat in 1854. The next year, in 1855, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow published The Song of Hiawatha, an epic poem based on Ojibwe legends of Hiawatha, or so it seemed. Inspired by coverage of the Grand Excursion in Eastern newspapers, and those who read Longfellow's story, tourists flocked to the area in the following decades. Hiawatha, a real person, was the co-founder of the Haudenosaunee, or Iroquois Confederacy. Depending on the version of the narrative, he was a leader of the Onondaga or the Mohawk, or perhaps both. According to some versions, he was born in Onondaga, but adopted into the Mohawk. Hiawatha was a follower of the great peacemaker, Dagan Awida, a Huron prophet and spiritual leader who proposed the unification of the Iroquois people, who shared common ancestry and similar languages. The great peacemaker was a compelling spiritual presence, but was impeded in evangelizing his prophecy by foreign affiliation and a severe speech impediment. Hiawatha, a skilled and charismatic orator, was instrumental in persuading the Senecas, the Cayugas, Onondagas, Oneidas, and Mohawks to accept the great peacemaker's vision and band together to become the 5 nations of the Iroquois Confederacy. The Tuscarora Nation joined the Confederacy in 1722 to become the 6th nation. In attempting to date the great peacemaker and Hiawatha, an incident related to the founding of the Iroquois Confederacy that involves a division among the Seneca Nation, a violent confrontation began and was suddenly stopped when the sun darkened and it seemed like night. The Seneca were the last to join the original 5-nation confederacy. Seems a bit ironic to me that the Hurons were not a part of the Confederation. There were, in fact, a number of other Iroquois people who also did not take part in the Federation. Possible dates for an eclipse include 1451 and 1142 A.D. There's some debate about which would mark the creation of the Iroquois Confederation, but most seem to lean toward the 1451 date. Well, the Lake Superior and Mississippi Railroad, created in 1863, was the first rail link between the Twin Cities and Duluth. Financier J. Cook had selected Duluth as the northern end of the new railroad. Lyman Dayton, a local businessman, put up $10,000 of his own money to do the original surveying work and served as the railroad's president until his death in 1865. The Lake Superior in Mississippi was completed in 1870, running through the city of Carlton and along the path of the St. Louis River to Duluth. Later that year, the first passenger train started running between the Twin Cities and Duluth. The Lake Superior in Mississippi was a victim of the Panic of 1873, as J. Cook's company was overextended and burdened with financial commitments to the Northern Pacific Railway. The Lake Superior in Mississippi reorganized in 1877 as the St. Paul and Duluth Railroad. Arriving in Minneapolis, Twain's party checked into the Hotel West, a delightful place. 6 skilled reporters spent 2 hours with Mark. He was lying in bed and very tired, but he was extremely courteous to them, and they all enjoyed the interview. In the evening, Sam gave his lecture at the Metropolitan Opera House. The house was filled to the top gallery with a big crowd of well-dressed, intelligent people. It was about as big a night as Mark ever had. He introduced a new entertainment, blending pathos with humor, with unusual continuity. This was at Mrs. Clemens' suggestion, that she had the idea that too much humor tired an audience with laughing. Mark took the hint and worked in 3 or 4 pathetic stories that made the entertainment perfect. The show was a triumph, and Mark will never again need a running mate to make him satisfactory to everybody. Wednesday, the Clemens party took rooms in the Hotel Ryan in St. Paul, Minnesota. Prior to his evening lecture at St. Paul's People's Congregational Church, which was commented on in glowing terms by St. Paul papers. July 25th, Thursday, the Clemenses spent the day in St. Paul, Minnesota, and on July 26th, they departed for Manitoba, 600 miles to the north.